I've seen interesting theories before across the internet that deal within the gray lines that are often present in the Naruto universe. Such gray lines being pain and his concepts of how revenge and peace work, the cycles of hatred, and each person's attempt to get rid of it. What so few people realize is that many of the main antagonists of the series were attempting to, in their own way, do away with the cycle of hatred. And so, because of these gray lines, the theory has cropped up. Who was the real villain of the Naruto series? And the biggest question of all, was the villain actually Naruto? Welcome to the Amagi. Before we begin, only 25% of our viewers are subscribed, so if you're a fan of the video, please like and double check if you are subscribed, and with that out of the way, let's get into the video. It's said that everyone is the hero of their own story, and this can often be true. So one must question whether using the term hero and villain is appropriate at all. Instead, we should be using the term protagonist and antagonist, as both of these are actually terms that lack a moral coding. The protagonist of a series is simply the main character, while the antagonist of the series are those who work against him. Despite being a hero, Itachi was an antagonist, and despite being a villain, Eren Yeager in Attack on Titan was the protagonist. So now with a morally gray line drawn, we can begin to determine whether this theory actually holds any water. We'll begin by talking about the Akatsuki, which consists of characters like Nagato, Obito, and Madara. Then we'll move to the protagonists of the series to see if they could be considered heroes or villains. The antagonists. Nagato. The first antagonist we'll talk about in regards to whether they were actually a hero or not will be Nagato, as the concept he worked under being one that we are as a human race have actually been living under for all of our lives. Nagato was once a starry-eyed young man who believed in peace, and so he helped found a peacekeeping group called the Akatsuki. Nagato's view on peace was what some might call naive, to make everyone happy and to make them want to lay down their arms of their own accord. But he was faced with the hard truth that not everyone wanted peace. Some people wanted war. They used it to gain power, and it came to be realized very soon that the world's very economy ran on the concept of war. For anyone who has ever played the video game series Metal Gear Solid, particularly the fourth installment, Guns of the Patriots, the concept of a war economy is not a foreign concept. To bring this into reality, I'll explain how war can be profitable. After the end of the First World War, the United States of America was thrown into a period of mass poverty known as the Great Depression. The era began in 1929 and lasted for 10 years, until 1939. It was around this time that the Second World War began, and during that time, the Allied forces, standing against the axis of evil, would begin creating and distributing weapons. The United States began creating weapons of war that could be bought and sold by other nations, and that influx of funds seemed to help pull the country out of the worst economic downturn in their entire history, and brought them back into the realm of a world economic superpower. When wars are prevalent, there are a few things everyone needs: food, water, medical supplies, weapons, and most importantly, soldiers, and none of these things are free. World wars are profitable because the more allies you have, the more money you can make. Rich countries will spend more money on weapons and forces that are sold off by poorer countries, and that begins to equalize the GDP among allies. The same is true of the Naruto world. In their world, just like ours, what is most important to people are two things. Number one is wealth, and number two is power. Power is secured by force, building forces and supplies, and wealth is built by producing forces and supplies. The Naruto world has displayed many different nations, and at the very heart of these nations are hidden villages, where shinobi are trained from childhood to make war with other nations. There's a reason why there were already 3 world wars before the start of the series. The Naruto world is based around the concept of training to fight in a war, and so the Naruto world is fueled by a war economy. Pain sees this and recognizes that true peace will never come so long as war is profitable. So long as blood brings money and power, blood will be spilled. So Pain believed it best to end the wars in general by shoving it down the throats of all who participated. Teach the world pain. Just as a child is disciplined by its parents, oftentimes receiving a spanking for doing something wrong, Pain planned to spank the world. And to do this, he relied upon a new theory of peace known as deterrence. Minato Namikaze was actually a believer in this concept, which is why he elected to seal the Nine Tails inside of Naruto, as opposed to letting Kushina take it to the grave with her. Minato sacrificed his life for a deterrent, which is what Naruto became. The balance of world power would have been thrown off. When every nation hates the other, the only thing stopping them from killing each other is the threat that if you do something, you might end up being killed too. If Konoha had lost its tailed beast, the forces of Iwa, Suna, Kumo, any nation that hated Konoha that still had a tailed beast, would use it against the village. That's why Naruto was necessary. But Minato wasn't the only one who believed this either. Itachi was also one who believed in it, which is why he attempted so hard to stop the coup. Not because he was more loyal to Konoha than his own clan, but because he knew that if a coup occurred during this time, it would weaken Konoha's power substantially, during a time when they were already struggling, so to go through with a coup would lead to another world war. That's why he destroyed his own clan, not just for Sasuke, but because he knew it would ensure peace. Deterrence is a concept that has kept the world safe for years. While the Cold War was a scary time in the history of the world, it is believed that had the East and West not both possessed nuclear weapons, it would have erupted into World War III. While we were afraid, we were also alive, and many lives were saved because of the concept that one sword keeps another in its sheath. And so, Pain's belief was that he would show the world what war brings. He would display his power by activating the Ten Tails and using it to show that the fate of the world was in his hands. And then, he would rest his hand. He would kill no more, and the people of the world would be too afraid to fight. Just as Hiroshima and Nagasaki saw the loss of close to 200,000 innocent people, it taught the world the horrors of nuclear war and was what brought deterrence. This is Nagato's idea. It may seem cruel, but in a world where hearts are so closed off, did he have any other choice? Obito and Madara. Obito Uchiha was a boy who fought during the Third Shinobi World War and experienced its horrors firsthand. First when he himself was nearly killed during it, and later when the love of his life actually was killed by it. He and Madara met, and Madara began to show him everything. Madara himself had been raised during the Warring States period, and he had seen the horrors of war just the same as his friend and enemy Hashirama Senju. They witnessed their brothers and friends all die for something they didn't understand, and witnessed the loss of childhood and children. 8-year-olds go out to war and come back as men who cannot sleep at night, men who grow dark in personality despite being prepubescent. That was what led to the foundation of the village. But while Hashirama believed that the human heart was what could protect mankind from war, Madara was not so naive. He knew that only strength could do that, and in the end attempted to prove his point. And so he did. Hashirama had let go of his attempts to reason with Madara, and had to resort to killing him to protect the village. Later on, Hashirama would adopt these ideas and try to stabilize the world with tailed beasts and deterrence, but this only stalled the inevitable. The point was, war and peace were two sides of the same coin, and this coin would continue to be flipped by the hand of fate until the world spun itself out of existence. Madara began to search for a way to separate peace and war from the coin. In essence, Madara wanted a double-headed coin, one that, no matter how many times it was flipped, would always come up to peace. To do that, he needed to alter reality and concepts themselves. He needed to separate cause and effect. There could only be winners if there were losers, and there could only be love if there was hate. That needed to change. There should only be winners. There should only be love. Madara had witnessed the curse of hatred and wanted to change it forever. To do that, he proposed the Eye of the Moon plan. The concept behind this was not too far removed from the brain in a vat theory. The concept of that theory is that the world is only as real as our brain perceives it to be. Feeling in your hands, sights, sounds, everything is nothing more than electrical signals going to your brain. So how can anyone be sure they're not currently living in the Matrix? How do you know you're not in a video game? How do you know that you're not already in a dream? That concept was what Madara's plan was working off of. Maybe the world was a dream, maybe it wasn't. Whatever the case, he would put the world into a dream so real that they would not be able to tell what was false. He would put the world into the Matrix. And being in control of his own world, Madara would then be able to separate causal nexuses and destroy hatred at its source, giving people their own tailor-made world of peace and dreams. Everyone came in first place if they were the only ones playing. Madara could make that world where nobody had to suffer and die. And to do it, all he needed to do was gather the tailed beasts and use them to lull the world into a dream that would give them everything they wanted. And to that end, he recruited Obito and began to set up their plan, because to him, the only way to bring peace was to remove the need for war in the first place. And that need was facilitated by conflicting ideas and the need for revenge. Does this not sound heroic in its own right? But let's move on to another group to see if they're truly as squeaky clean as they seem. The protagonists, Sasuke. Honestly, I was hard-pressed to put Sasuke on this list, as he himself has stood against Naruto on many occasions and was a threat to the village. I probably should have included him in with the villains, but considering that he later becomes Naruto's Shadow Hokage, it's probably best to put him here. The purpose of this is to show that the heroes aren't all they're cracked up to be, and that they can be just as dark as the villains, and Sasuke is no exception. Sasuke Uchiha has seen a lot in his life, but the one thing he always stood for, even during his time as a protagonist in Part 1 before he switched to the dark side, was to kill his brother. This later evolved into a hatred of Konoha as a whole, and the question of whether vengeance was evil enough to be considered a villainous trait. Was Sasuke wrong to want revenge? After all, when everyone you know and love has been murdered, what else is the natural response? Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, you want blood repaid the same. And this led him to kill Itachi. Well, he technically didn't kill him, but he certainly didn't help matters. But upon learning that Itachi was acting under Konoha's orders, Sasuke switched his vengeance to Konoha and planned to destroy them instead. So technically, Sasuke is already in a morally gray position, but could technically fit in with either side of the argument. For the sake of argument though, let's remember what he was in Part 1 before leaving, and what he became in Boruto, and label him a protag for now. Kakashi. This one's a little more cut and dry. We know our boy Kakashi has always been a protagonist no matter what point in his life. But despite the fact that he stood with Naruto throughout the series, Kakashi has blood on his hands and has done things considered villainous. Not long after his time on Team Minato, and during his time in the team, he killed many people. As a warrior in the Third Shinobi World War, he killed many people. But during his time in the Anbu, and at some point Root, he would actually commit many atrocious actions, such as assassinations and massacres, and anything else that was so dark it could only be relegated to the Black Ops, and then the Black Ops of the Black Ops, Root. Kakashi worked under Danzo, and man, I could write a whole essay on the kind of man Danzo was. But I still consider Danzo the antagonist because of the way he worked against the Leaf just to get power. We know he choked off response from the Anbu during Pain's attack just to embarrass Tsunade and steal her position. I mean, if that's not a defined example of what an antagonist is, then I don't know what to tell you. But back to Kakashi, the old boy certainly does have red in his ledger. It's gushing red, if I may pull a quote from Loki. And despite the blood on his hands and the hand he nearly had in taking out Hiruzen, he's still considered heroic and on the side of good. So what is it that makes him a hero when the Akatsuki were not? Was it loyalty to the Leaf? Well, that's all well and good, but the Leaf was definitely not blameless, and many wars were, in fact, instigated by the Leaf and various other nations around the world. So if anything, Kakashi's patriotism actually contributed to the endless cycle of hatred that the Shinobi world found itself in. So while not slandering Kakashi, as he's one of the coolest characters in the whole series, ranking at one of my top 5 at least, the theory dictates that I at least remind you that he's had some not so heroic actions in his past. Naruto. Oh boy, it's gonna be tough digging up dirt on Naruto. Anyway, Naruto himself had for the longest time been treated badly, and this isn't a part of why I say Naruto was misguided by any means. He couldn't help what he was, but all in all, it did contribute to his decision to become Hokage, in so much that he specifically chose to become Hokage because he wanted to force others to respect him. His hatred of Nagato was also laid bare when he tried explaining why Pain was bad, and why Naruto himself was not. This is ironically the same argument that I'm using. While Naruto himself may say that attacking the Hidden Leaf and its people was evil, it was true that the Hidden Leaf itself had also attacked other people in the past and destroyed other villages on their own, such as Amagakure, which saw desolation more times than one might be able to count. So how can Nagato be a villain for doing the exact same thing that Konoha, a supposedly heroic village, had been doing? Especially if Pain were doing it to bring about peace, which seemed to be a concept that, while Konoha claimed to desire, actually stood counter to their entire way of life. Naruto himself and his mother and Mito Uzumaki before Kushina were all weapons of mass destruction, originally created to be so by the founder of the village and Naruto's previous incarnation, Hashirama Senju. Hashirama was a man who seemed to desire peace, but all in all became the very thing he wished to destroy. All Hashirama succeeded in doing was conglomerating the warring states. There was no difference. The Warring States period might as well have been called the Great Ninja War Zero because that's what it was. The only thing Hashirama managed to do was better define the battle lines and in turn make each war more devastating than the last. And while he claimed that he wanted to form the village to keep children from becoming soldiers and not needing to go to war, it certainly didn't stop the likes of Obito Uchiha and Rin Nohara from fighting and dying for their village. Despite believing that peace could be won through the meeting of hearts, Hashirama seemed to lose faith in that quickly when Madara threatened them. Hashirama had to build up military power, creating the Jinchuriki system that caused so many others, like Killer Bee, Gaara, and eventually he himself in the form of Naruto, to suffer. And it was all to use projected power as a means to maintain peace, since it seemed the human heart was too feeble for such peace to exist. Hashirama Senju, despite being the founding Hokage, the one happy to save others and sacrifice himself for peace, certainly did nothing to contribute to keeping it, and instead ended up being the one to bring war into a more deadly stage. He helped get rid of the fog and confusion of war, but in doing so he ensured that the enemies of the village were stronger and better equipped, in that he gave out the tailed beasts to other nations, which Pain himself seems to believe was his biggest mistake. If Hashirama wanted world peace and didn't want people to die, then he should have kept all the tailed beasts for himself and played world policeman with them. Conclusion: world peace could not be achieved because peace cannot exist so long as people are different. People tend to favor their own beliefs and unify with people of similar beliefs. They tend to become patriotic toward their own nation, and that causes hatred for people of differing opinions and nationalities. The flags that represent each nation also become a symbol of animosity against other nations who, for the moment, have decided that they disagree with you. And that is what Naruto's series and its antagonists come to learn. Until everyone was united under a single belief, or were the only people living in their own personal world, the world would continue to spin into an everlasting fireball of blood, sweat, and tears shed upon the battlefield. This was why Naruto wished to get all the tailed beasts. He wished to become that single world-ending threat that could unify the people. It's said these days that humans stand against each other, but should aliens invade us, should they actually exist that is, that all of humanity would band together to face the invaders and drive them off. And the same is true of the Akatsuki. If you want to think about it, the fragile peace that Naruto and his friends currently enjoy within the Boruto series is all brought on by the Akatsuki. So in the end, they actually achieved their goals. Even if it wasn't in pain that they were unified or through dreams, it was in war. The Akatsuki gave all villages a single threat to unify against, and so when all nations in the world began flying the same flag, the flag of the allied shinobi forces, they forged a bond that has lasted through the years. Without the Akatsuki and their threat, the world would still remain on a hair trigger, with the series likely seeing its end in a very different Fourth Shinobi World War, one that could have proven to be the very last for very different reasons. But now that we've talked about the theory itself and thoroughly bashed all of our favorite characters, let's give the theory a rating on whether it actually holds water. Personally, I give this theory 2.5 nature transformations out of 5 because I find it to be neither true nor untrue at the same time. The whole point of the Naruto series is to point out the moral gray that exists and how people often flee behind their own nation and concepts of what is good and what is evil. The path to hell is paved with good intentions is a phrase that's used quite often. And the path to hell is often described as a broad path to destruction, and many there be upon it, while the straight and narrow has few people who should count their blessings to have found it. That's how the Naruto series treats it. Pain had a point that the world has issues, and he pointed these things out to Naruto. And Kakashi himself has done bad, as has Sasuke, but just like Madara and Obito, the series tries to show that when we alone try to fix the world, we fail any way we turn. But the series also insinuates that it's never too late to turn back, and that those who sincerely seek peace, truth, and general goodness will eventually find these. Naruto is a shining example of a hero and a protagonist, which was why it was so dang hard to dig up any dirt on him at all. For real, I really had to dig into Hashirama Senju, who made all of his decisions out of necessity, and despite the fact that he may have helped contribute to the darkness of the world, he did offer the setup that would eventually lead to peace. People are often forced by their circumstances to do things they don't want to and choose between the lesser of two evils. And I'll never say that Hashirama never did anything good or right. He did his best, and that's all anyone can ask for. All the heroes did, and sometimes it was a losing battle, choosing between the lesser of two evils. All of the characters in the series are like this, which is why this theory is neither true nor untrue. The Akatsuki, as well as the heroes, did morally questionable things for the sake of peace, and it's because both sides did these things that peace came. Coming down to it, the question is, who hurt or would have hurt more people? And the answer is the Akatsuki. Pain wanted a mass attack on the world to subjugate people via fear, and Madara and Obito both wanted to rob the world of free will in order to force them into a dream world where nothing was real, leaving their real bodies to rot outside. Obito and Madara would have ended the world in a few days flat just to see humanity have a peaceful world for one generation. That's not good. Even if Kakashi, Sasuke, and Naruto had missteps, their decisions eventually turned to the greater good, and that's what defines them as the heroes, trying to do good. And that's why this theory gets a low rating. Some may have differing opinions because, honestly, definitions of what is good and evil in this world seem very morally gray these days. It goes to show that the same issues in Naruto exist within our world: disunity. And until such a day that unity comes, there will be no peace. But it won't stop me from praying for it. Anyway, what did you think of this theory? Give us your explanation and rating. I love it when viewers offer their opinions. It helps us make more content tailored just for you. Be sure to subscribe and ring that bell too to receive a notification for when we drop more content like this. Until next time, peace out.